Siamo con Kristen Williams, regista di Hereafter, selezionato nella sezione sperimentale del programma di quest'anno. Hello Kristen, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Big hug from the staff of the festival. I wanted to ask you some questions about your short film. Um,
hmm
Human beings always thought and imagined and fantasized about death since the beginning of time. And the feeling of death in literature has always been rich of visual stimuli and has always been associated with a different visual perception. And that's basically what you did. You've chosen a medium that is 16 millimeters experimental film that is made by processing and editing found footage that could give you like the most alienating combinations of images. Would you talk about the process and why you chose that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really wanted to work with film because the way I kind of think about film is like it's kind of I see it as kind of an artistic material since you can like hold it, touch it, process it yourself as opposed to digital where you like put it on a SIM card, you put it in the computer, etc. Um, so I really wanted to work with that because I kind of see it as kind of like a body in a way since it's like a material thing and I could take this material that captures kind of indexical images of our world and kind of use experimental processing and other like types of working with the film to like bring it into an area, a visual place that's beyond what it was capturing, as a way to kind of think about death as us like leaving our bodies and going elsewhere, maybe nowhere, whatever people think happens with death. So, yeah, that's the main reason why I wanted to use film. And so, for the process of it, it was kind of crazy. I did a lot of different things with film, honestly, because a lot of it was just kind of seeing what would work if anything would happen. But my main process with it was I would take footage that either I'd already shot or I'd found, and I would print it onto 16 millimeter Kodak print stock, which is a really kind of weird variable stock. Because what it does, instead of like, what it's supposed to do is print from a negative onto a positive. But if you print from negatives instead of having, or if you print from positives instead of having the kind of orange backing of a regular color negative, it's like kind of green. It like renders everything kind of a greenish hue. And then if you like use different colored filters or like process it differently. You can add in other colors and stuff, and it's like a very kind of flimsy stock. So if you're to boil it, it can crack and kind of reticulate, which you can see in a lot of the sections of my film. So yeah, basically what I would do is I would print it and then I'd either reprocess it and like kind of flash it with light and different like filters, or I would take the raw stock and I'd put it in like different chemicals or liquids. Like I like one section I had put it in tequila and like soaked
Wow.
it for a while and then processed it. And then yeah, the other another section as I said, I boiled it in sodium bicarbonate to make it kind of crack and reticulate. And then yeah, it was just, or I would scratch it too with just like a needle. So yeah, it was a lot of different processes, but it was cool. It was kind of, it was fun to see what would turn out, honestly.
But is a film like this related to like a personal anxiety experience or backstory, or where did your interest in that experience sprout from? Do you have like a story to tell us?
Um, Honestly, I've kind of always been interested in death. My parents weren't didn't really beat around the bush with me about like death. Like I knew what it was from a very early age. And so I was always kind of fascinated and interested by it. And then like once I got into my 20s, I started having like much more like real experiences with death. Like I had some family members die, and then a close friend of mine's father died, and kind of dealing with that. And so it was kind of a lot of different experiences with death. One of the main things that kind of pushed me to want to make this film is like one of my friends, not a close friend, but died in like a car accident, and his car like caught fire and burned. And like I saw it on Snapchat and kind of witnessing that, and like very terrible death by accident was a lot to process. And so it was kind of another part, kind of a way for me to work through that experience. But it's kind of an overall, it's always been something I've interested in. That was just kind of the final push for me to finally decide to make that movie, the film.
But how did you gather all the interviews that are like constituting the background voice of the film?
So so I heard about something called a death doula, and for those who don't know what that is, it's like a birth doula who helps people through the birthing process, but it's kind of, I guess, the opposite of that, where it helps people through the dying process. They help people through the dying process. And so I kind of researched and looked for death doulas in my area, and I found two who were willing to talk to me. And so I talked to them, and then one of them suggested a woman who's a Qigong practitioner. And for those who don't know what that is, it's like an ancient Chinese martial art and meditation practice. And they kind of work with the different chi and stuff to bring you to like different levels of consciousness and stuff. And so I talked to her. And then I found a psychic on, I think just on the internet, and she was willing to talk to me. So I talked to her. And then one of the interviews is actually my dad, who was a first responder for a while, and I knew he had had some really insane experiences with that, so I wanted to talk to him. And then the rest of the people I just kind of put out an open call to be like, anybody who wants to talk about this, welcome to. And so most of the rest of them just wanted to talk to me about it. I want kind of a mix of people who like had like very interesting experiences with death, and then like other people who just kind of either didn't really have any experiences or kind of had, I guess, normal experiences, however you can define that.
Do you think that before your film we will play another film that is is also about life and death and about this man that dies,
Hmm.
but it's told with a very grotesque comedy tone. Um,
Hmm.
your film, of course, speaks about the same topic but with a totally different, approach. Is death for you
Hmm.
like a stimulus to artistic creation, like it originally was, like in classical literature, when death was like the center of the piece, and was everything was sprouting from it or going to it?
Yeah, it definitely is. It's either, for me, it's either a very central thing in my work, or it's always like an element of it. Because I think that, like, I mean, death kind of influences everything we do in this certain way. The way we kind of interact with the world, the way we interact with people. And so I think it's kind of interesting to work with that as like a theme constantly, because it's like a theme in our lives. And yeah, it's always just been fascinating to me too, like the different ways people think about death and different ways you can depict it. And like even some of the work I'm working on is kind of thinking about what if death wasn't a thing, like what, because in a lot of films death is kind of like a finality, but what if that would like it began with death, a character dying. So
And I'm doing this. I'm making this question to everybody, and it is: what is your idea of cinema, and what do you think you can add if you had to consider yourself as an author to the already existing, gargantuan mass of films that there is out there? I know it's
yeah.
an odd question, but it is also about who you
Hmm.
are, as an artist, and what can you bring us, what can you really tell that is really unique about you?
Yeah. So, my definition of cinema, I don't really have kind of a strict definition, because the way I look at it is kind of trying to define like what is art. And I feel like if you kind of get a little too strict in that, you get into like a realm of gatekeeping and stuff, which I'm definitely not about. So my concept of cinema is just kind of whatever anybody can define as cinema, and if you can argue it well enough, I'd say that is cinema in a way. And so what I feel like I can contribute to cinema is I feel like I'm a relatively empathetic person. I try to kind of approach all of my work with kind of a humanistic approach and a lot of kind of empathy, because a lot I love people and I'm fascinated by people and the way that their like minds work, and they like interact with the world and each other and just different experiences like death and their different ideas of things like that. So I try and kind of approach it with a very humanistic approach as much as possible. And I try, and in the visual realm, I try and do things that like haven't seen before, and create work that I haven't seen before, and make it as unique as possible. So I guess that's my contribution.
And what are you doing next? Where are you headed now as a filmmaker?
So I'm thinking about doing another kind of experimental documentary, somewhat on the lines of Hereafter, but a little bit more tuned down, about sexuality and gender. And then I'm also writing a western, so a little bit different.
Two different things, but also Western is very connected to that in some kind of way.
Absolutely. So yeah, like both in the realm.
Okay, Kristen, it was very interesting to hear about your process, and thank you for joining us for this interview, and also good luck for the competition.
Thank you.
And we'll hope to have you with us again in the next years with your new works.
Yeah, that would be great.
So goodbye, and see you soon from all the festival stuff.
Yep. Bye.